The thing in the containment field snarled, a low seismic rumble that vibrated through the floor. It was the size of a shuttlecraft, quadrupedal, with a scaled body that shimmered like oil slicks under the overhead lights. Its breath steamed against the reinforced glass, and its eyes, black, lidless, unblinking, tracked every movement in the room. "Do not go near it," barked Guard Specialist Trellick, one of the 4 stationed around the enclosure. His gray skin glistened with stress-induced secretion. "It is not capable of social behaviors. It responds only with violence." Xylen Soren adjusted the straps on his environmental harness and leaned slightly toward the glass. "Has it actually killed anyone?" Trellick stiffened. "It vaporized 2 handlers during transfer, bit the arm off a 3rd. It is not to be studied, it is to be contained." "Right, but what's it called?" "It has no designation, no name. It is a Class VI threat entity, that is all." Xylen turned to the other 3 members of the human science team. They were still unpacking gear, checking scanners and pressure seals. The air on the station smelled sterile, but there was a faint tang of ozone near the creature's holding cell. "Any sign of neurological mapping?" Xylen asked without turning around. "No stable readings," replied Xylen Soren, the team's neurobehavioral specialist. Her auburn hair was tied back in a strict braid, but her expression was soft with curiosity. "Every scan comes back scrambled, like it's jamming us intentionally." "Or unintentionally," Xylen said. "Could be a side effect of how it thinks." "Does it think?" Trellick scoffed. The beast slammed a paw against the glass. The metal braces groaned. Trellick stepped back reflexively, his expression flickering between fear and fury. "I want this thing out of my jurisdiction within 48 of your hours," he said. "Study it, dissect it, I do not care. But when it tears your bones free of your skin, do not expect me to intervene." Xylen nodded. "Understood." Once the guards left, the atmosphere in the lab shifted. The humans moved freely now, less like guests and more like scientists. "I'm going to call it Fluffy," Xylen said. Halia blinked. "You're joking," he grinned. "No, look at it, all those teeth. That's a Fluffy if I've ever seen one." "Xylen, it dismembered someone. And yet it's just standing there watching us now," Fluffy paced. "It didn't growl this time, it didn't snarl." The eyes moved from technician to technician, pausing longer on Xylen than the others. "Could be recognizing you," Halia murmured. He stepped closer to the glass. "Hey, Fluffy, you want to talk?" The creature tilted its head. Halia took a sharp breath. "That's mimic learning posture. Some terrestrial predator species use it." Xylen tapped the glass. "Say something back," Fluffy roared. Everyone flinched, but Xylen held his ground. "That's a start," he said. Over the next 2 days, they rotated observation shifts. Fluffy showed signs of memory retention, responding to different vocal cues, especially from Xylen. When he entered the room, the creature would stand still, ears angled forward, tail twitching. On the 3rd day, they received clearance for controlled interaction. In a secondary chamber, separated by a reinforced gate, Xylen stood alone. The gates hissed open, Fluffy slinked in, low to the ground, muscles coiled. Xylen didn't move. "No sudden gestures," Halia said over comms, "and don't speak unless it does first." Fluffy crept forward. It stopped 5 feet away and sniffed. Its breath was hot and reeked of minerals and meat. Xylen slowly extended one hand. "Come on, Fluffy. You're not going to eat me, right?" The creature lunged. Xylen dove sideways, hit the wall, and rolled. The room filled with alarms. Guards stormed in, weapons raised, but Fluffy didn't attack again. It stood still, tail low, ears back. "Hold," Xylen shouted, coughing. "Don't fire." The guards hesitated. Xylen stood shakily. His side ached from the impact. He limped forward, breathing hard. Fluffy bowed its head. "What the hell?" Halia muttered. "It's apologizing," Xylen guessed. He reached out again, slower this time. His fingers brushed the creature's snout. It didn't pull away. "Get out of there," Trellick barked from the comms. "You are out of your depth and your mind." But Xylen didn't move. The creature leaned into his hand. Over the next week, contact increased. Fluffy responded to commands, learned basic gestures, even tolerated a harness with biometric sensors. It wouldn't let anyone but Xylen near it, though, not even Halia. "Bond imprinting," she said. "It's chosen you. Lucky me." On the 10th day, disaster struck during a transfer to the upper testing deck. One of the alien handlers ignored protocol, approached from behind, and tried to jab Fluffy with a tranquilizer. Fluffy spun, claws flashing. The handler screamed. By the time the alarm sounded, the man had lost his leg. He was alive but in critical condition. Fluffy retreated to the corner, growling. Xylen rushed in moments later. "Fluffy, down!" The creature hesitated, blood still dripping from its claws. Then it dropped to the floor with a low whine. Trellick arrived seconds later, 3 guards in tow. "That thing is done, we're spacing it." "No," Xylen snapped. "It was provoked. The protocol was broken." "It is a monster, it's a predator. It followed commands until it was threatened." Trellick shoved past him, weapon raised. "Out of my way, human." Xylen stepped in front of Fluffy. "You'll have to kill me too." The standoff lasted 30 whole seconds. Then Halia appeared, holding up a datapad. "We have video. The handler broke containment rules." Trellick hesitated. Furious, he lowered his weapon. "Fine. But if it happens again, I won't wait for debate." After that, Fluffy's access was restricted. Only Xylen could handle it directly. He began training it with tactile prompts, teaching it to respond to colors and sounds. It learned faster than expected. "You know," Halia said one night as they watched Fluffy nudge a colored cube into the correct receptacle, "this level of learning isn't just unusual. It's impossible for something that size and build." "Maybe it's not just muscle and instinct," Xylen said. "Maybe it's been misunderstood the whole time." That night, he stayed late in the lab, feeding Fluffy by hand. The creature's eyes blinked slowly, its body relaxed. "You're not so bad, are you?" he whispered. Fluffy licked his hand. Then the sirens blared. Xylen turned as the lights went red. Overhead, a mechanical voice droned. "Containment breach. Deck C, multiple fatalities reported." Fluffy rose. Its ears shot forward, alert. Xylen tapped his comm. "Status," Halia's voice crackled in. Something else broke loose, not Fluffy. Something worse. "Trellick, dead." Xylen looked down at Fluffy. "You ready to help, big guy?" Fluffy growled low. He opened the secondary gate. Fluffy stepped out beside him. They moved down the corridor, side by side. The corridor trembled with distant impacts as Xylen and Fluffy moved at a cautious pace, passing overturned carts and long streaks of blood that hadn't dried yet. Emergency lights flickered overhead, casting everything in haphazard flashes of crimson and gold. The air had a tang of scorched metal and something far less sterile, something organic and wrong. "Scan ahead," Xylen said, lifting his wrist console. "We need to know what's around the next bend." The display flickered, spat static, then froze. He slapped it twice, but it stayed dead. Fluffy's ears twitched, signal interference, same as before. Fluffy let out a low chuff, then turned its head left. A second later, they heard it 2 heavy footsteps, slower than a sprint but deliberate. Something was coming. Xylen ducked into a maintenance bay and signaled Fluffy to follow. The beast hesitated, then slid in behind him, tail brushing the bulkhead. They crouched behind a stack of coolant drums just as the thing entered the hallway. It was unlike Fluffy in every conceivable way. Tall, bipedal, with skin that shimmered like shattered obsidian. Its limbs were spindly but ended in claws too long to be tools. Its head was a split array of mandibles and fused sensory stalks, and it stopped every few meters to sniff the air. Xylen didn't breathe. Fluffy trembled not in fear but restraint. The creature paused. One of its stalks curled toward the maintenance bay. It took a step closer. Then Fluffy launched. The impact shook the walls. Claws met claws. Fluffy's bulk slammed the intruder backward into the corridor wall with enough force to crater the plating. The thing shrieked, a piercing, metallic wail that shorted out every light in the vicinity. Darkness swallowed them. Xylen stumbled into the corridor. Sparks burst from a ruptured conduit. In the strobe-like flicker, he saw Fluffy pinning the creature down, jaws clamped over its chest. The alien thrashed, kicking with its hind legs until it broke free and vanished into the shadows beyond the hallway's curve. Fluffy turned to follow. "No," Xylen shouted. "We regroup first." Fluffy paused, then snarled and returned to his side. They headed for the auxiliary med bay. The main one had likely been compromised. As they moved, Xylen tapped into the emergency broadcast channel. Static, then a broken voice. "Breach on deck D, multiple casualties." Avoid it cut out again. They reached the med bay 5 minutes later. The door hissed open manually. Inside, a single overhead light flickered. A young technician leaned against the wall, clutching a leg wound. Blood had soaked the floor under him. "Hey," Xylen dropped to his knees. "How bad?" The tech's lips were pale. "Femoral nick. I tried the clot gel, but it's not holding." "Name, Rilo." "Systems maintenance." Xylen grabbed gauze, a compression wrap, and a vascular clamp from the med cabinet. He pressed the clamp into the wound, then wrapped it tight. "You're going to lose consciousness. Don't worry about that, just breathe normally." "I saw it," Rilo murmured. "The tall one." It pulled Senka out through a vent. She didn't scream, just disappeared. "Don't talk, save your strength." Fluffy sniffed the air and growled. Xylen turned. A secondary door creaked open. Halia stepped inside, rifle slung over her shoulder, eyes scanning the room. "You're alive," Xylen gestured to Rilo. "Barely." She knelt beside him, checked the wrap. "He's stable enough to move. We need to get him to Shelter Bay 3, about 15 minutes east." "Is that bay secure?" It was. Last update came half an hour ago. Xylen nodded. "Let's go." They fashioned a sling using supply straps, and with Fluffy's help, they hoisted Rilo onto its back. He clung weakly to the harness loops as they moved through darkened halls strewn with debris and the occasional lifeless form. They reached a corridor junction where the floor had buckled and twisted. A fire suppression foam had half filled the space, making visibility low and movement awkward. Halia grunted as she climbed over a collapsed beam. "What exactly broke out other than our friend here?" Xylen helped guide Fluffy over the rubble. "No clue, but whatever it is, it's not just killing, it's collecting." "Collecting," he nodded. "Corpses are vanishing." "That thing we saw didn't leave the handler's body when it attacked." Halia's eyes narrowed. "Then it's feeding or building something." They reached a sealed bulkhead. The access panel blinked red. "Power's out," Halia said. "Manual override." Xylen knelt and pulled the panel off. "You cover us." "Fluffy, stay alert." He connected 2 wires and yanked the failsafe lever. The door groaned open halfway before jamming. Fluffy nudged it with a shoulder, forcing it wide enough for them to squeeze through. Inside Shelter Bay 3, the lighting was intact. Dozens of survivors huddled near the far end. A pair of medical personnel rushed forward to take Rilo. "Any command staff?" Xylen asked a technician nearby. Lieutenant Aresh made it. "He's coordinating evac routes." They found Aresh near a command console, his uniform torn and arm in a sling. Xylen, Halia, glad to see someone competent. "We need data," Halia said. "On all escapees, not just the tall one." Aresh tapped the console. "There were 5 entities in stasis. 2 were transferred last week. The remaining 3 included your subject and 2 classified specimens." "Which one escaped?" Xylen asked. "Both." A silence fell. "How did they breach stasis?" "Unknown. Power failure in the lower containment grid. They didn't break out. The locks disengaged," Fluffy growled. "You're saying someone let them out," Halia said. Aresh didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it either. "We need to find the second loose one," Xylen said. "The tall one's already caused enough damage." Aresh shook his head. "It's worse than that. The second is a metamorphic infiltrator. It can mimic organic tissue, indistinguishable from the real thing." Halia stepped back. "Are you telling me one of those things could be in here right now?" "Possibly already is." Xylen looked around. Dozens of eyes stared back. Any of them could be a threat. Then someone screamed. A woman near the back convulsed, her skin bubbling, shifting. Bones snapped, twisted. "Back!" Aresh shouted. The thing that had been the woman split open into something half-shaped and boneless, lashing out with hooked limbs. The crowd scattered. Fluffy leapt. The fight was brief. The mimic had no armor, no real structure. Fluffy tore it apart, then stood over the pieces, chest heaving. Xylen looked at Aresh. "We need full diagnostics on every survivor, now." "I don't have the staff." "Then lock this bay down." "No one leaves until we're sure." Aresh nodded, then turned to his team. "Scan everyone. Blood panels, thermal imaging, neural response. If anyone hesitates, sedate them." Halia approached Fluffy, who was grooming blood from its claws. "You've made quite the case for its usefulness," Xylen nodded. "And it might be the only reason we're still alive." Hours passed. Eventually, scans confirmed no further infiltrators. Casualties across the station exceeded 70. The tall creature had last been detected near the reactor core. No one volunteered to pursue it. Xylen did. "I'm not letting it vanish. We track it. We end this." Fluffy stood beside him, tail twitching. Halia sighed. "Then I'm going too. Someone has to keep you from getting your spine rearranged." Aresh handed them a map. "Maintenance shafts run parallel to the coolant lines. You'll find it faster that way." Xylen nodded. "Let's move." They left the shelter behind. Fluffy led. The first heat wave hit them as they passed through the sub-ventilation shaft beneath the reactor housing. The air shimmered like desert pavement, thick with coppery humidity. Pipes lined the walls, some sweating condensation, others hissing faintly as pressure equalized behind their seals. Xylen wiped his brow with the back of his glove. "Feels like someone's boiling soup in here." Halia pulled her jacket collar up over her mouth. "If the coolant fails completely, it won't be soup. It'll be a meltdown." Fluffy crouched low, tongue flicking out once as it tasted the air. The light from Xylen's shoulder beacon bounced off its scales, casting ripples on the surrounding walls. Without warning, the creature stopped and flattened against the bulkhead. "Wait," Xylen whispered. They listened. A faint clicking echoed down the shaft, not mechanical, wet, purposeful. Halia drew the plasma cutter from her hip. "That's not a maintenance drone. Whatever it is, it's between us and the reactor core." They continued forward, this time with Fluffy leading in absolute silence. It moved with eerie fluidity, shifting its weight like a creature born in zero gravity. The shaft sloped downward, narrowing until they reached a rusted access grate marked with an old caution glyph, half erased by time. Xylen removed the grate and dropped into the chamber below. He landed softly, crouched low, then scanned the space. The room was cavernous, one of the ancient auxiliary chambers from the station's first structural iteration. A forgotten place. Dust clung to the ceiling filters like moss. Halia followed, landing beside him with a grunt. Fluffy dropped last, tail curling around its legs as it took in the space with slow turns of its head. They moved as one toward the far end of the chamber, where a gaping breach in the wall led into the reactor's thermal recycle corridor. The breach wasn't part of any schematic. The metal edges were warped outward as if something inside had forced its way through. Xylen crouched beside the torn bulkhead. "This wasn't done with claws," Halia nodded. "Looks like an acidic melt. The alloy's been pitted and restructured. The thing's biochemistry must be reactive." Fluffy sniffed the opening and gave a short exhale, then slinked through. They emerged into the main cooling corridor. The lights here were still online but flickering. The walls pulsed with warning colors: amber, then violet, indicating unstable pressure in the coolant system. Xylen tapped the wall console. The display spat out a diagnostic. Coolant flow reduced by 70%, reactor temperature rising at a rate of 5 degrees per minute. "We've got maybe an hour before the core starts failing," Halia said. "If the tall one's sabotaging systems, it's trying to force an evacuation or a detonation." Xylen glanced at Fluffy. "Smells like bait." Fluffy growled low and began pacing. It stopped at a side door, sniffed the base, then looked back at them. Xylen approached the door. Locked. Halia leaned over the panel, only from the inside. It's sealed with a manual override. Someone or something is in there. Xylen pulled the emergency release and twisted the valve. The door hissed open. Inside, the walls were slick with a translucent mucus, webbed across consoles and pipes like an organic lattice. In the center of the room, the tall creature stood motionless, facing away from them. Its arms were fused into the wall, threads of its body merging with the machinery, Xylen whispered. It's interfacing with the reactor. Fluffy didn't wait. It lunged with a snarl that echoed like thunder in the tight space. The tall creature detached with impossible speed, flinging itself across the room as Fluffy struck the wall where it had been. The impact sent a shockwave through the floor. The creature whipped its limbs outward, each ending in an elongated blade of chitin. It moved with a fluid, whip-like grace, dodging Fluffy's strikes with inhuman precision. Halia ducked behind a console and pulled out a thermite charge. We've got one shot at this. If it gets back to the reactor interface, we're done. Xylen reached under a panel and yanked out a coolant valve. Jetting vapor sprayed across the room, blinding the creature for a moment. Fluffy capitalized on the distraction and slammed it into the ground, jaws locking onto its shoulder. The creature shrieked, its body convulsing. A limb shot out and pierced Fluffy's side, drawing a hiss of pain. Fluffy didn't release its grip. Halia ignited the thermite and hurled it toward the reactor interface. Flames erupted, chewing through the composite cables. The room filled with smoke and chemical stench. The creature writhed, then twisted its torso unnaturally, slipping from Fluffy's grip. It stumbled toward the exit. Xylen stepped forward and fired a bolt from the plasma cutter, striking it in the lower spine. The thing collapsed, twitching. Fluffy limped forward, placed a clawed paw on its chest and pressed down slowly. The body stopped moving. Halia scanned it. No vitals. Nervous activity ceased. Xylen looked at Fluffy's side. The puncture wound was deep, bleeding steadily. I need gauze now, he said. Halia threw him a medkit while she checked the reactor interface. The system was glitching but stable. The temperature had leveled off. Xylen cleaned the wound with antiseptic foam, then packed it with coagulant matrix strips. It's through the muscle but missed the major vessels. You're lucky. Fluffy grunted softly, then sat back on its haunches. An hour later, they were back in Shelter Bay 3. The survivors had been moved to a secure docking bay where evacuation shuttles were being prepped. The station's AI had re-established partial control. The mimic corpses were incinerated in a sealed vent chamber. Aresh met them at the landing pad. You did it. Xylen nodded. We shut the interface down. Both entities are neutralized. Aresh looked at Fluffy, who sat calmly beside them, still favoring its wounded side. And this one? Not a threat, Halia said. Not anymore. Aresh gestured toward the shuttle. We've cleared a bay for it on the medical transport. If it's injured, it should be stabilized before atmospheric re-entry. Xylen turned to Fluffy. You ready for a ride home? Fluffy stared at him for several seconds, then chuffed once and climbed the ramp without protest. Later, aboard the shuttle, a medic approached Xylen with a puzzled expression. We've been monitoring its vitals. It's healing faster than anything we've ever scanned. Just keep it under observation. The medic hesitated. It's also humming. Xylen raised an eyebrow. Excuse me, the medic played back the audio. A low, rhythmic vibration, almost melodic, emitted from Fluffy's chest as it slept. Halia leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. Maybe it's dreaming or communicating. They watched Fluffy snore softly, the hum continuing. Whatever it is, Xylen said, it's not just an animal. As the shuttle detached from the docking ring and accelerated toward the orbital gate, the stars outside stretched to streaks. The station behind them grew smaller, a wounded relic drifting in the void. Xylen glanced at Fluffy one last time. You're going to confuse a lot of scientists. Fluffy opened one eye, blinked once, and went back to sleep. The hum continued.